Chaos in Afghanistan as Taliban take control. I just want to dive in right now. This is a developing situation. Here, joining me today is Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, who has an extensive background in the military as well as intelligence. So I just want to welcome you right in and dive in. Like I said, so much has happened in such a short period of time. We just heard from the president, his remarks on the situation. What are your thoughts on what's going on?
So President Biden lives in a different world. The plan that he ended up approving and implementing had nothing to do with Mike Pompeo and President Trump's plan. Look, full disclosure, I spoke with Mike Pompeo, corresponded with him when they were developing their plan. I was able to provide him inputs. Sometimes we yell at each other, but Mike was going down the right path. And so the plan that Pompeo and President Trump put together was not anything which Joe Biden did. It was a conditions-based role. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, that's the biggest pushback that you get from this. Of course, when we have situations like this, there's always finger pointing. And many, I mean, including myself, to be honest, are saying, well, I mean, this is what Trump wanted to do, right? He wanted to pull troops out. So what is the difference right here?
So the difference was conditions-based. One of the things I and others recommended is that you maintain some level of military overwatch so that if things start going wrong, you have the ability to affect them. And I'm one of those who agrees we need to be gone. We should have left 10 years ago. We should have left 10 years ago, and we still had the advantage and could have leveraged this better. With that said, the idea is that on 1 May, these groups, the Taliban, the warlords, the tribal leaders, and the government would come together. We would push off and let them start working on it. And then we would be able to affect things militarily if the Taliban broke its word and did other things to be aggressive. That plan never happened by the fact Biden disregarded the 1 May deadline. And let me say this and be very clear about it. The reason we saw such a growth of the Taliban is when that date came and Biden decided to break the agreement, the Taliban went to all the warlords and said, see, you can't trust them. You need to give us your resources and soldiers. It's fighting season. Let us use them. So that's why you saw the Taliban grow and all of a sudden become very effective. The other thing is patronage. The military that Joe Biden kept referring to, 300,000, it may be 30,000 at best, because it was full of corruption. For every one man on the roll, 10 were being paid. That's how bad it was. And by the way, Biden was told all this. The intelligence officials, I was speaking to a former general over the weekend who actually was advising Mark Milley. They were telling this to Biden, and he wasn't listening. So I'm sorry, I put this right at the feet of President Biden based on the people I advised, the people I spoke to who gave him the best possible advice on this issue.
And that was going to be my next question. Since you have an intelligence background, is there reason to believe that they knew much more? I mean, is it fair for him to say this just happened so quickly, that much is unexpected?
No, not when he gets a question 30 days ago and the media says, hey, you all said, hey, we're being told the Afghan government's going to collapse. And he says, no.
There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comfortable.
Nobody forced him to do that. So it's very clear that the intelligence community knew, the Pentagon knew, and gave him the best advice. And I've been very critical of Mark Milley, but I'm pretty sure, based on what I've been told, General Milley laid out exactly what could happen if we did it his way versus the Trump plan. And let me be very clear on this. The Pentagon was part of the Trump plan and had put in place a sustained military capability. Giving up Bagram, I spent a lot of time at Bagram. Giving up Bagram, the military post just north of Kabul, was a bad idea. That relieved all of our military capacity within the region. And from there on, there was no ability to affect anything. Now you see us scrambling to put 6,000 troops back in just to pull out the people who need to be evacuated.
You brought up General Milley, and I was going to talk about that later, but since it's brought up now, he's been supportive of critical race theory. He's compared Trump to Nazis. They want mandated vaccines for military members. So what is happening to the U.S. military? Are they trying to get them to either conform or leave? Are they trying to demoralize them?
I think the military has gone through some really difficult times and by the way, I served under SecDef Austin. When Austin was a brigadier general in Afghanistan, I worked for him. He signed off on my Bronze Star. So Austin came in and did a stand down, which I think damaged morale. I've talked to folks who went through that. I think that distracted from the military's mission. And then Mark Milley saying he's focused on white rage. I think that was a bad thing to say because just the way he said it, he acknowledged, oh, I have white rage. It's not a good picture to have in the chairman. So the chairman gets on this white rage issue. We fail in Afghanistan. I would not want to be Mark Milley at this point because of the legacy he's going to have hung on him. But yes, the military is far too distracted with the social issues, social justice issues that undermine its ability to fight wars and be prepared to do what it's doing like right now. And I still believe that unfortunately the Afghan mission, even with the new troops going in, will not go well because the military does not have the heart and focus it needs to successfully win operations and missions.
We've touched upon this a little bit, but I want to come back to it and really help viewers understand in layman's terms. How would an exit strategy under the Trump administration look different? Or any administration for that matter, what is an appropriate exit strategy in a situation like this?
So, as I mentioned, the whole idea, and I said this in my book, I wrote a book on this issue, Operation Dark Heart, the last chapter, The Path to Victory, and I said basically we had won. I wrote it 10 years ago. We had completed every element of the authorized use of military force. It was time for us to leave. Heck, it was time for us to leave in 2004 and simply go back and do targeted missions. The decision to stay and nation build is what caused the problem. So that the issue was, how do we stop nation building but maintain security? That's what the Trump plan was. It wasn't to abandon everything and just leave. The idea was to stop nation building, let the Afghan people choose their governance, and we pull out, let all the elements of Afghanistan come back together, work with our Pakistani allies to facilitate the overwatch, and then maintain some presence because we had the right. We were wronged on 9/11. When I was there initially, we were welcomed by the fact that we were just another tribe who was wronged by the Taliban, and we had the right of vengeance. So we needed to get back onto that. It's like it's not our job to pick and choose governance of Afghanistan. Our job is to defend our equities and make sure radicals could not again launch operations to attack us or our allies. That's it. So that was the difference. It wasn't like walking away. And plus, to the point of Biden saying, well, I don't regret my decision. There was no decision just to pull everything out. There's no decision to turn the lights off at Bagram in the middle of the night and abandon our most effective military presence in Afghanistan. So and we would have had measured and effective combat operations to stop the Taliban should they acted out like they did. There would not have been a collapse of the central government in the way it was. I don't think it would have collapsed. And if it did, it would have taken weeks and months longer. So we could have had more time to get people out. That's the differences I see in the two plans.
Some are comparing this to the Saigon evacuation. I saw you did as well. How is it similar or different?
It's worse. Look, I said, I do a Saturday morning broadcast, and I said, we're not going to see helicopters evacuating at the last minute off the roof of the embassy because there's nowhere for the helicopters to fly. So what I said you would see is these airplanes, C-130s, C-17s at Kabul International, lined up trying to get people out. Sure enough, that's what we've been seeing. It's like World War Z, the Israeli overrun of the airport scene, World War Z. That's how bad it is. And literally you have people falling off C-17s trying to cling on for their life. So I would argue it's worse than Saigon. We knew Saigon was going to fall, and we have made arrangements to try to evacuate people. Joe Biden pulled the military out. Despite what he was told about the potential collapse, he did it anyway. And what you've seen is total chaos, where American citizens, Afghans who helped us, and other allies on the ground now are at jeopardy, and Kabul is in total chaos.
And hopefully you can shed some light on what happens to our military hardware, or Humvees or guns and things when we have to exit in these manners.
It's bad. Look, Representative Walter Jones and Jim McGovern asked me to work with Tony Zinni, General Zinni, former commander of Central Command, to do a survey on this issue back 10 years ago. General Zinni went in and did an independent evaluation of how long it would take to pull gear out. Tony Zinni said in 2011, if we started today, it would take 10 years to get everything out. They were never going to get everything out. And the idea was in the end to just basically abandon stuff. Now think about this. We're talking about $88 billion of gear left behind in some form. 88, that's a lot of money. So this I put right at the feet of the Pentagon for their lying. There was something wrong here. The Pentagon kept telling members of Congress, I was in the hearings, that everything's fine. We're going to win this. We're going to have a sustainable army. We're going to protect it. And it was all a facade. I had whistleblowers coming to me telling me that this was not going to happen. I helped try to get them to members of Congress. Members of Congress admitted to me they knew they were being lied to, but they went along anyway. So all this gear, you know.
It looks like it's almost an arms transfer at this point.
Oh, they left everything behind. This is some of the best technology in the world. I argue we should have helped them buy Soviet-era Russian technology, which is a step down from ours, that would not be a peer competitor and would be easier to defeat if they came back at us. I was shouted down. No, we don't want to do that. So I'm just telling you, the Pentagon chose to do what they did. This was deliberate. They knew this was a potential, and they did it anyway. And now you have the most robust, well-armed Taliban, better than when we defeated them in 2001.
And there are now reports that 30,000 refugees are on their way here, essentially. We also have what's happening at the border. I was just at the border recently, so tons of migrants coming in, now 30,000 refugees coming in from there. What are your thoughts on what's happening as far as our borders?
Well, the southwest border needs to be secured. I mean, in one of the hospitals near the border, 80% of the patients in this hospital are infected aliens coming across. That's wrong. Our DHS is allowing a super spreader event. If you really believe there's super spreader events, DHS is doing this. They're putting people on buses and airplanes and moving across the nation. It's unconscionable. I don't care how you feel about immigration. It's not about immigration at this point. Either you really do believe we need to be stopping COVID or you don't. They keep saying they do, and they're doing this sort of thing. Regarding Afghanistan, look, I think we owe the people who helped us in Afghanistan refuge. We did this in Vietnam. We brought a lot of people back. There's great Vietnamese communities. I know there's one in Arlington I spent a lot of time in the past with. Great people. I think we should do the same thing. We owe it to the people of Afghanistan who helped us to not allow them to be slaughtered. So if we need to take 30,000, we need to take 100,000, I'm all for it. But it needs to be done legally. It needs to be done with screening. It has to be done in such a way that we feel comfortable with the security process. We're all a nation of immigrants. My mother's side of the family came over on the Lusitania in 1910. So my other part of the family is German. So we all came from other places. I think we should welcome people, but it has to be done in an orderly way. And we can't be bringing people in who are infected, who are going to cause further downstream outbreaks of disease.
I wanted to ask you about Stratus IV and if this is a repeat of an airlift of evil.
Well, the issue that I see right now is that we have so many things going on that Joe Biden has decided to jump in and tweak based on political beliefs. I was talking to a reporter who's a friend of mine at a three-letter big network. And she asked me the question, how do I see what's going on? I said, you have a president and his cabinet governing from the position of wishful thinking. Everything they do is based on wishful thinking. So that's the issue that we have to examine here, is how do we convince our elected leaders that they need to be paying attention to the facts on the ground and acting on those rather than their political beliefs. What they're doing is very dangerous. And by governing through the lens of political emotion rather than ground truth and reality, they're going to cause more catastrophes within national security. And that's what I'm most worried about at this point.
Speaking of political beliefs, you have Taliban, which are clearly terrorists. And then just yesterday or the day before, very recently, we have them coming out and saying anyone that has any concerns about election, anyone that is opposed to COVID measures is now to be considered a terrorist. Is this how far we're taking it now?
That's how far they want to take it. And again, they're trying to essentially criminalize political dissent. It's very dangerous. I have never seen this. I was talking to one of my close friends on this over the weekend, and it's funny because we used to see some of those folks who had those beliefs as kind of, kind of misguided. We saw the left as a bunch of misguided folks who just didn't seem to understand. And I didn't care. As a active intelligence officer, I didn't want to be in politics. But now, my concern is you have members who are in official positions in the government who are acting politically to thwart legitimate political dissent and not wanting to believe in masks. Tony Fauci himself said masks don't work, store-bought masks don't work, and now you're a radical if you actually listen to what Tony Fauci said. The vaccine is still experimental. The FDA has not given final approval. I don't know when it will, but I think people have the right to actually say until the FDA doesn't approve it, I'm going to be skeptical. And my son's a first responder. He got the vaccine. I've never said it's like, don't get the vaccine, go get it if you need it. I think people are owed their freedom to make that choice, to consult their doctors, to consult medical professionals, and not have unelected bureaucrats tell you what's best based on the fact that they're acting politically, not medically.
And I want to wrap this up for you, but on that note, it was censorship issues mainly that drove me out of traditional media and into independent media. And I know that you have had your own experiences with that with your book. How do we get out of this? It just seems to be getting worse and worse and more extreme.
So my book, they went after because the target of Dark Heart was Amin Zawahiri. They don't want me to put that out there at the time because, oh my God, it's very embarrassing that we had a shot at this guy in 2003. And then I was very critical of the Obama surge. I said it wouldn't work. Who'd have thought? So here we are. So that's the issue. People need to be obligated to be heard, even if their voice is going against the mainstream narrative. This is what's dangerous about this overarching big tech, big brother telling you what to think and do. The truth gets lost. There's a war on truth at this point. And I appreciate your honesty and integrity trying to push away and say, it's more important to be honest. I've made a career of it. I've suffered. I would still do it again. But yes, they come after you if you're speaking things which go against the momentum of the culture, the momentum of the political narrative. And that's wrong. It's not American. American, what made us great as America is that we have the courage, both as individuals and as groups, to speak up and tell the truth. And that's why it's so important for you, people like you and others, to push back against big media, big tech, and try to establish a space where we can have these great conversations and talk about what we need to talk about.
And there's a million different directions we could have gone with all of these topics. Is there anything that we didn't cover, especially considering Afghanistan, that you really want to hit home on?
Well, I would love you to ask me back when I'm more situated, since today's a bit chaotic. But I'll have my studio reset and it'll be a much more professional setting. I appreciate you being able to take the time today, but I think it's important to continue the conversation. Like you said, 9/11's coming up. There's a whole range of things going on that. There's issues relating to the border. There's issues relating to Afghanistan. There's issues relating to China. China's going to be rolling in behind us because they've actually got 2 copper mines, and they're going to recognize the Taliban government very quickly. So these are the things I would like to continue the conversation with you about in the future.
That sounds great, and I'm going to hold you to that and have you back on and tackle some of these other issues. But thank you again so much for your time, and that's going to do it for us. I'm Christy Lee for KLTV.News.